to attend. May I ask Lisa Ford, are there any conflicts of interest, either in relation to today's meeting or anything new? None, thank you. And could I ask you to look at the minutes of the last meeting in public, which was the 20th of June meeting. As you know, we also had the AGM in September, but these are the 20th of June meeting. Any corrections? And anything arising not covered in today's meeting? Thank you. And let's move then to our Chief Executive's report. Fiona.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Just to reflect, the NHS, along with the public sector, voluntary sector, and everyone in all work walks of life are dealing with a lot of challenges and difficulties. In the NHS, it's particularly stretching. We're not where we would want to be in terms of being able to be responsive and as accessible, both in emergency and in planned care, and across the NHS, and that would apply to Frimley as well. However, when we come to our performance reports, you will see that comparatively, we are continue a trajectory of improvement. That still doesn't meet where our public and patients would want us to be, but comparatively, we continue to be able to respond better in our emergency departments. Our primary care colleagues are seeing more people, both face-to-face and virtually, than they did pre-pandemic, and that trend continues. But we also know that our local authority partners, some of whom are sat around the table and represented here today, are facing into the same funding and financial challenges that we're facing in the NHS, which has been reported publicly in terms of our performance at this point of time in the year, and the challenge to both meet our responsibility to our public and patients, but also to balance the books, is a very, very real challenge for us at the moment. And that led us last week, and the board approved this, to launch an internal consultation with all of our staff in the Integrated Care Board to be able to take 30% out of our operating costs, which does lead to a direct impact on our staff. We've shared that consultation and engagement approach with our partners, and we're now in full scale working through what we're aiming to be a true consultation and engagement, where we have redesigned our operating model with bluntly fewer staff and fewer posts, but also trying to make real, where we can, integrating more with partners, whether it be NHS providers or local authorities, to really maintain our focus on our mission to address health inequalities and unequal experience and lived experience and health and wellbeing across our systems. So that's been my thanks to the staff, who've been absolutely brilliant in responding and engaging with us, but it was causing deep distress as we go into the busiest time of year in terms of the NHS and winter. And I suggest that we will continue to, as a collective, attempt to meet those challenges, but really energised and inspired by all the communities we work with. And certainly, I was reflecting with Blue Coals earlier, the huge power of partnership working and connecting together that I experienced last Friday night at the One Slough Awards, where members of the voluntary sector, business, the NHS and Slough Borough Council were recognised for amazing work to support children, to support individuals and communities with their mental health or with their isolation, And it was truly inspiring at the most difficult times that you could still deliver great things through partnership working. We really have to hold on to that together. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's move then into our agenda. We're starting with our sexual safety charter, and over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. You have a presentation on the floor packs, and I'm going to briefly talk about some of the things on the presentation. So the sexual safety and domestic abuse and violence programme was established in July 2022. And in June 23, we received a letter from Steve Russell outlining specific work with ICB to support discharge of the responsibilities. First thing we had to do was to identify an executive lead. I am your executive lead for both sexual safety and domestic abuse. And we had to identify some operational leads. Our operational leads are Shahana Ramsden for sexual safety and Sharon Valentine, who sits within the safeguarding team for domestic abuse. And actually in previous work that we did on our foundation structure, we established a post that recognised and incorporated domestic abuse. So it's something that's been for a while, something that's important for us. Organisations are being asked to sign up to the Sexual Safety Charter. We are proposing to sign up to it, but we wanted to declare our position where we are and then submit that following this board meeting. Companies in our system that are signed up are BHFT, the Foundation Trust, and South Central London Service. We will be working with our other partners to support them to consider signing up and taking part in this charter. We will need to be compliant with the 10 key commitments by July 24th. You'll see as we go through this what the charter's about, what the 10 commitments are, and we've completed self-assessment. I wanted to share with you some reflections from my own career in the NHS about sexual safety, because it's really easy to think, but it doesn't happen here. I had a colleague in the early 2000s that would receive texts from a male person within the organisation, just commenting on what she was wearing, what she was doing, and it was very uncomfortable. And obviously, it wasn't something that was easy to comment on. And I remember the impact, the personal impact that it had on the child. We were both relatively, we weren't the most inexperienced. We were, I think, AAs at the time. So that's relatively senior within the organisation. If you think in terms of a hospital, it's probably ward manager, matron type level, but we felt powerless to do anything at that point in time. So it does happen. I know things are much worse for a lot of other people. I think it was, for me, to see the impact on her of feeling quite fearful was quite difficult. So I think this is really important. I think we'll have all seen that the report that came out that talked about the sexual safety operating department, which is it really smacks you in the face, doesn't it, around the impact of it. So we've looked at our compliance with sexual safety charter, and you can see that we're not green on anything yet, and that we are definitely red on some things, but that will be changing. And by July 23, we will bring back something that is far more positive to share. But I thought it was important to start from a positive baseline. We've looked at our records of sexual safety cases, and you can see that there's nothing that's particularly evident. But I think, bearing in mind I think there's two reasons for that. One, I think the type of organisation that we work in and the fact that we're working at home will reduce the likelihood, but it wouldn't reduce the likelihood for the type of thing that I explained, which is one of the reasons why I shared it, because actually we could be lulled into a false sense of security in this organisation. So it's important that we look at it. And I think that once we've looked at ourselves, worked with our partners to encourage it, then we'll work with our wider organisations across the NHS and think how we do use our contracts to enact some of that, because we do have a contract, so you know, put it into the contract that people would sign up to the sort of sexual safety charter. I think when we talk about domestic abuse, the thing about domestic abuse that I think is really important to understand is how in plain sight it often is that people are cognizant of it across things, and it's one of the things that still is possibly the type of abuse that is still accepted in society more than it should be. I think the other thing is it's a real leveller. It's not to do with inequality or lack of money or anything like that. It's the thing that you'll find across all parts of society and in all countries. So we've got a very active group of things that we're doing, and we've got 16 days of action this month for domestic abuse that we are working on. So just to give you a real flavour of what we're trying to do, we're trying to implement the charter, and well, we are going to implement it, we're not trying, and just an honest appraisal of where we are, and we'll come back with a positive story for next week.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Any comments and questions?
Thank you, Sarah. I think it's hugely important. Will this be shared with primary care as well? Because it's great to hear the large organisations involved.
It's definitely, that's when we talk about, so it's about, in the first instance, it's getting our own house in order, because actually we can then share with primary care the tools and resources that we develop, so that the same primary care doing it 50 odd times over. But absolutely.
Great, thanks.
You know, when we had the EDI roadshow in October, we had a workshop on sexual safety, and it comes back down to your point, Sarah. I think we can't underestimate how much it is happening. But I think what people don't do is want to speak up about it. And it's not just the kind of really overt, but actually the subtle things that people are really scared still to bring up, especially if you're a younger person or, you know, from a minority group, that, you know, there's layers of that complexity. So that was a real eye-opener, even though we know it's happening, actually. You can't underestimate how much of it is happening. So I just wanted to put that.
Rachel and then Dylan.
Just wanted to ask a question about informal resolution. So I think elsewhere in the slides it references the fact that the majority that have been raised so far have been resolved through informal resolution, and how we test how satisfactory that is as a resolution, because sometimes informal resolutions of this type of thing aren't real resolutions at all. So how can we be confident?
Absolutely, and I think that it's a bit like some of the work we're doing under freedom to speak up. It's a bit of probably learning. I think our tolerance to things changes over time, isn't it? So what we might have thought was acceptable 5-10 years ago is a bit of a journey and a learning curve. And actually it's really difficult, isn't it? So another example that I'm personally aware of is things like somebody in a position of power talking to you about a person you're wearing and making you feel uncomfortable. You probably are going to go for an informal resolution, because as a one-off instance that feels quite small. But I think in the same way, the impact of when I read the Michelle Cox case with the microaggressions that were contained in that, actually as individual little things, they don't feel that much, but when you put it together, so I think it's how we're going to learn and test and learn from it. And I think there's a lot we can do. It's through learning from freedom to speak up and the anti-racism work to how we approach this. And I think we start from the position of education and putting the support mechanisms in place to manage it. I bet we did it because we felt comfortable before informal resolution.
Thanks. Thanks for a really helpful update, and in particular, thank you for the honest and open review of compliance, the kind of RAG rating that you've put in on one of your slides. And I just wanted to check. It sounds like you're keen that we carve out space to routinely look at this and support. You know, make sure you're making the progress that you want to. I just wanted to check in that, you know, you've got the resources you need. If your plan is that this all looks green in a year's time, you know, you've got what you need Or do you know how you're going to get what you need in place to move it forward? Because a lot of this is influencing people, changing behaviours, quite soft stuff, but some of it is a bit more crunchy. So I just wanted to test that with you, really.
Yeah, so I think it's around piggybacking on existing things that we've got. I think there is a real danger, isn't there, with any of these things. If you try and do it completely separately, it will be a bit like whack-a-mole. It becomes the thing that you're doing at that moment. It has to be part of that wider cultural brief, supporting, the elements of things like the Freedom to Speak Up, anti-racism and all of that. It's got to be just part of how we do things around here. So I wouldn't want separate resource for it.
Good. Good to see this is being implemented and the timelines that you have in mind for the evidencing of those steps. And thank you very much. Let's move then to the urgent and emergency care update, and I'm going to stand.
Thank you, Chair. You've all had a paper in advance, and it's quite long, so I'm not proposing to either present the slides that you've got, but I will put out some headlines and leave some space for Q&A afterwards as well. So I think there'll be some value in that. Headlines, really, the context are that demand remains extremely high for urgent and emergency care services. We are not in winter proper yet. It was 14 degrees yesterday. Our main point of delivery, not just our acute hospital emergency departments, are extremely busy as we head into winter proper. We also face a number of external challenges, which everyone in this room will be aware of, including industrial action and some of our estates challenges as well. You'll know from discussions that we've had previously that we are continuing to try and take a long-term focus to improvement for urgent and emergency care, but we're trying to do that in a very short-term environment. And the challenge clearly for us collectively is how do we transform for longer-term sustainability whilst meeting the needs of our residents today. In terms of this year and heading into winter 23-24, we have submitted a detailed operational plan. It shows and sets out very clearly, I think, how our whole system will work together to improve care and access. And it shows where we're going to place our capacity this year to try and meet our residents' needs most effectively. Many people will be aware that NHS England released a set of guidance earlier in the year at the end of the summertime, which demonstrated exactly what they were seeking from systems in order to achieve those shared goals. It's focused on a number of high impact interventions, and you see those set out in your paper, I think, very clearly. We have submitted a compliant plan to that task, which sets out our trajectory to improve access and performance this winter. I think for the board to really note is that our in-year plan, which is not just meeting a national requirement, aligns completely with our UEC strategy. So there is a direct read across between strategy which this board approved last year and what we are setting out to do this winter and beyond. Much of that mapping is set out in the document, and hopefully it gives board members some assurance and confidence that we're on the right track with our long-term transformation, as well as delivering that improvement in year this winter as well. You'll also see, I think, set out in the document, the importance of the devolution of this work and that it not being held in a single organisation or team. This will only work if all of our organisations, our partners and our staff work together around these common goals and challenges. Clearly, it's not all about our acute hospital services either, and our really strong focus, which you can see set out in our ICS strategy, which was refreshed and published in March of this year, is to keep people well and safe and out of hospital where possible. And we have a number of initiatives which are set out in more detail in the paper around additional primary care appointments, our use of urgent community response, virtual wards, remote monitoring, and ensuring that people can get home when they're safe to go home and keeping them well and safe there too. We're also investing in additional same-day urgent care capacity as well. And you'll see, again, contained in your paper, the rationale for doing that. We think that there are up to 240 patients a day whose needs could be better met outside of the hospital environment. A new service launched a few weeks ago in Slough, and we're exploring other services elsewhere in our geography which could do something similar. In terms of how we're overseeing all this work, ensuring that our partnership approach is biting and is effective, We're still improving, iterating how we do that, but much of the work that we put in place last autumn to change how we operate our oversight work, I think is still very relevant for this winter and is proving to be effective as well. We want to ensure that we're doing three key things, I think, in how we work together in that space. One is ensuring that we've got really strong collective accountability for our operational elements of our services, including patient flow through them. Secondly, that we can provide very rapid support to each other in periods of peak pressure. And thirdly, that we have collective oversight around ensuring that our transformation initiatives are both deployed and are effective when they are deployed as well. I think I'll just finish by saying that this is clearly a team game. It's not relevant only to this organisation or to any other single organisation. It isn't relative only to the NHS either. The only way we'll succeed in this is by working together and to be sure that through our partnership, we give our residents what they need this winter ahead. Clearly, there's an awful lot more detail in the paper. I hope people have had time to read it and digest it. I'm not going to sort of give any more of our own headlines, but really happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sam. It's going to be incredibly difficult again this winter as we try to support our residents to feel safe and healthy in the community and get access to the right support when they need it. It's really important that we make sure people are supported out of hospital as swiftly as possible, because people need to go back to their previous place of residence or their own homes in order to recuperate and get better. And just to add to the comments that you made, Sam, in amongst the words on we've overhauled our winter governance, we also have our multi-agency discharge and close steering group, where we all work together as directors of social care along with our health colleagues to work through those nutty issues. So, for example, the data. How many people are in hospital and how many are waiting? It's a national issue in terms of having one view of the truth. We've achieved that now within the system. So the work that we've been doing in the past 12 months, we now have one combined data set so that we know all those individuals and how long they've been waiting. That's really important when we're swiftly trying to support people to get out of hospital safely. I just wanted to add that because it didn't come out effectively through the slides. But so just to say, it is going to be very difficult, but partner agencies are working together with health colleagues to ensure that we can complete this because it's very helpful and keep running.
Thanks, Sam. It's a really great paper, and actually this is our second winter together. I think it's really good to see the learning from last winter, the work we did last winter to what we're doing this winter, and you can really see the kind of thoughtfulness around that and the approach that's being taken. I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about the communications plan, and in particular, how do we encourage and support people to stay, on the right side of this in terms of looking after their health over the winter period. We know there's a lot that people can do to do that, and also just to reinforce Granya's point about how we help keep people stay safe in their own homes and their own communities during this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely critical, I think, and you won't be surprised to know that there's a really detailed winter comms plan which has already been developed and is being rolled out. I think I'd pull out a few things which are really pertinent because we're learning from last year or what's new this year. So last year we saw a really big impact on children and young people through use of promotional tools like the Healthy Around and other avenues like that. We had that big surge last year in cases of RSV and scarlet fever, and be something different this year, but the learning from that is really helpful for parents and young people as well. Two, I mentioned the fact that we are standing up new services this year. Those services need to be promoted in the right way, so they're accessed in the right way. There's no point making the investment and all the operational work that's gone into making those actually available to people if you don't promote them correctly. And that's obviously another large tenet of what we're proposing. And the third piece is, you may have seen it around the patch if you live locally, this sense of primary care is open and encouraging people to access services that are there for them, noting that as we came out of the pandemic, that actually the way those services are being delivered has changed. but we want people to continue to access them and to use the services which will there to support them. So huge amount of work going into it, as you'd expect, because it is pretty big.
Rachel.
A question with our Director of Children's Services hat on about the lonely children presenting in any. So one of the questions was the presentation makes reference to 70-75% of those attendances are without prior GP contact. I was wondering whether that also means they were without 111 contact, or whether they had been directed only by 111 as a mum as well. That's something I've encountered a lot. And then the second thing was among the children who present at A&E, there will be a number who did need to be treated there, and in some cases there'll be admissions. They will include fever and head injury and abdominal pain and vomiting and in some cases hand injury. And I'm really interested in that parent's perspective of how you tell the difference between a head injury that needs to present at A&E and how you can determine a head injury doesn't allow that kind of expertise, because I think that will really assist parents in helping to help the system.
It's a great question, Rachel, and it resonates for me as a parent of small children as well. So we're always treading a line here, aren't we, between trying to communicate and encourage people to use the full range of services that are available, whilst not trying to discourage appropriate attendances going into a high acuity service when it's required. And I think that's the piece that we have to be really thoughtful of. I mentioned Healthier Together a moment ago. I think we had some real success through that route, because some of it is around supporting people like me as a parent in educating and informing and helping cope with parental anxiety, and when it is the right thing to do, to go into a higher acuity setting. The question around the cohorts, around no prior GP contact, no prior one-on-one contact. So we do have that data, and we are able to differentiate and split it out. So they are different cohorts. There may be some overlap between the two, but don't assume that one means the other, because they are separate. I think the thing about one-on-one dispositions, though, is really helpful to reflect on. And some of the work we're doing with the one-on-one team and with our Director of Services team is ensuring that when people do speak to the one-on-one, well, they are being sent to the most appropriate place. And so, again, some of that investment in new services this winter is to ensure there are alternative dispositions available for one-on-one to move people onto, rather than defaulting into repeat.
Thank you. Really good to see so much of the multi-agency work delivering now and making that difference, and to be a data-driven system where that's then determining exactly where we're putting the effort and resource. Great, thank you. We'll move now to 2 items for approval. First, over to you, Sarah, for capacity and access improvement plans, please.
Thank you. Or lovingly called the PCARP or PCARP, depending on who you ask. And this paper is to note. This was launched in May 23, but we were able to build on it from the work we were doing in the Frimley Primary Care Transformation Plan. So the paper details how we're supporting primary care to recover, and it talks about. It gives the key highlights of delivery. It talks about areas for further work and development around pharmacy first and the national digital framework. So I think I'm assuming everybody's read the paper. It's very clear. It's just describing where we're at and to provide assurance to the board that we are following the national requirement. Ash.
Thank you, Sarah. The paper is actually incredibly detailed and really reflects a lot of primary care success, I think, and that's supported by the system. So for the public members on the call, I would really encourage you to read it, especially the headlines on what we've achieved. Certainly the amount of extra capacity that primary care is delivering compared to pre-pandemic, and that's with a dwindling workforce. And I think it's important to understand that efficiency and productivity in primary care, supported by some of the sort of the national policies, are incredibly important, because there are 16 primary care networks in our system, all working immensely hard to try and create some of that organisational development. And that's something that's really, it's happening in our recovery, because just like many parts of the system, There is a fatigue in primary care, but actually that hasn't stopped us from evolving. And I think it's to Sam's point and the questions that for us as general practitioners who are heading up a wider team, we want to work with our public and communities to sort of repair a lot of the problems that the pandemic has caused, and that's really the way we work, the way we access healthcare, and it has to be as the document sets out, as well as future planning, it has to be a partnership between our communities and our public and patients, with sort of primary care and community, really in regards to sort of using the services appropriately. But it is actually very much general practice is open, and the data. We're also interested in understanding why our families are going off to. I'd like to see, and I think we've created capacity where we're moving some of the minor illness to other members of our team, so that I, as a general practitioner, can see some of the sickest children, because actually that's what we'll dine out on, which is the continuity of care. And I think if we can get that message right, that we're repairing some of those processes and communicating that things have changed, I think the paper shows that, then hopefully that trust continues to build. But it's really important that you come and see us in the community before going elsewhere.
They have confirmation then that we are content with that way forward. Sam, let's move then to emergency preparedness, resilience and response, our annual assurance process.
Thank you, Chair. The ICB is a Category 1 organisation as defined by the relevant legislation in this area. Part of that responsibility that comes with that particular legal duty is a requirement to demonstrate our compliance and our partner compliance with both regional and national frameworks which have been defined. This report, I think, shows the degree of that compliance locally. Headlines for the board to note. Firstly, we have no red-rated organisations in our local geography. We continue to work with those that are rated amber, even though these are organisations delivering services in our geography rather than those which are part more formally of our system partnership. And the ICB board members should note that for this organisation, as an NHS Frimley ICB, we are fully compliant with our EPRR responsibilities.
Do you have any comments and questions? And we are content to approve. Very much. Good. We will move now then to our reports, oversight reports, and reading us us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to give a brief overview of the position, then opening up for colleagues who have particular areas of interest, such as area of quality. So the financial position within the system as at month 6 is highly challenged. The system reported a year-to-date deficit of £16 million, although the forecast remains break-even, reflecting an intensive effort to mitigate that position in the last 6 months of the year. Within that, so Sam talked a little earlier about the urgent emergency care system, which is under very high pressure, and that is reflected in the performance deterioration in 4-hour lengths, 14-day lengths of stay, and the numbers of medically fit for discharge patients who remain in our acute trusts. On the planned care side, we are seeing improvements in the number of patients who are waiting 65 weeks and the 62-day cancel rates target. Primary care is extremely busy year to date. They have delivered 5% more appointments than in the previous year, which itself was the highest number of appointments in primary care that's had ever been delivered in the system. Face-to-face versus remote appointments in primary care, we are at 57% of our appointments are face-to-face, and that contrasts with 64% national average. But we are the highest performer in the South East with both 24 and 48 hour access. And it's a perfectly reasonable hypothesis that the two are inversely causal in relationship, that the higher the number of remote appointments are offered, the easier it is to access that service. Virtual wards are at 83% occupancy. Again, the community urgent response service referenced earlier, that service has received 1,340 referrals since April, of whom 96% have been seen within 4 hours. Moving on to learning disability and autism, the inpatients numbers are 29 against a trajectory of 20. The team are working on that, and it's clear that more autistic people are being recognised in hospital, and also there's a disproportionately high number from Surrey Heath, so the team are working on that figure. And finally, in children and young people, we are seeing ADHD waiting times increasing, which is in line with the national pattern. We'll stop there, and as Sarah, she'd like to come in on any quality issues with her.
I guess I think thinking about some of those waiting lists, especially around the neurodiversity, is thinking about what systems we've got in place to support people around so that they're waiting well. Because I think, I think it's a nationally recognised thing, isn't it? Long waits for autism and neurodiversity diagnosis, and I think that diagnosis isn't going to produce a magic wand at the end of it, and actually people need that support at the start of their journey, not at the end when they get a diagnosis, and that's what we've put into place. So we've got services that support parents and families and young people at the beginning of that journey to either through collective group work or for really troubled families and targeted interventions that we commission. And I think that's the bit that we don't sometimes see that goes alongside these ways, because actually getting the diagnosis isn't going to change anything overnight, but getting support to how you manage and support families letting it going into crisis is much more important. Very helpful. Did you want to move then to
nothing to add in terms of the overview, other than there's more up-to-date data that's now come in that continues to show the performance, particularly of HF2 in reducing agency expenditure continues at a downward trend, given the pressures that the trust is facing. Is exemplary performance across the region, particularly in that aspect. It's as I say, there's more up-to-date data coming forward. We've also done some work through the People Board, as it says here, on the education training plans for the system, recently signed off, and again through the People Board, that submission, which is an annual submission, has also been sent off.
Comments and questions then, please.
Just a quick question. With the change in delegated responsibility for POD, which stands for Pharmacy, Optometry and Dentistry, I just wanted to get a view from the exec in terms of what information are we beginning to see the performance in those areas, and is there anything you can in future share at board?
So what you have to remember is that the delegation is to the 6 integrated care boards in the system. So the board is a hub for those. And so we're setting up an oversight set of arrangements, refreshing the governance. And that is where the strands would be pulled together. And then what we would see as a board is our performance for the Frimley patch in terms of those areas of service. What we would seek to do is to ensure that there's a kind of clarity on the governance for the hub arrangements that we would need to sign off as a host organisation.
And what's the rough time frame for that?
Next couple of months. It's in development at the moment.
Great, thank you.
So we do see some of the data already, don't we, around some of those, obviously around data history, etc. And so we see all the complaints, for example, from all of the services within the Frimley CB. So we do have an understanding.
That's really started.
Okay. Where the challenges are. So we're seeing it, and obviously that would then flag if we were particularly worried about something through our executor.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. I think the assurance part will play as the host. We will see that information separately then to our performance data in relation to the delivery of that. And that's very good because from an audit point of view, you will want to see those separately, particularly the hosting arrangement information. Thank you. Rachel.
Just a comment really on risk. Worth reflecting as a board that we've got 3 risks that we allude to, despite mitigations and despite reducing the level of risk after mitigation, we're outside our risk appetite in these areas. So that's people, quality and funds, and it's not seeking any answers really, but as a board we ought to acknowledge that the environment in which we're operating is that challenging over those demands at the times.
This is a sobering time. We will be moving in a moment to the back and reviewing, given where we are and also what we've heard today. So it's nice to preempting. No, you're absolutely right. It's exactly right. To reflect on whether or not we do need any changes to the back as a result of where we've been since the last time we've been together, and also anything that we covered in today. Before we move on, are there any further questions or comments in relation to any aspect of the result reports and performance? Let's see. So, Rich, I will hand over to you for that.
Thank you again, Chair. Thank you, Rachel. So the BAF notifies and describes the principal risks of delivery of the ICB's strategic objectives supported as no BAF, and the risk analysis contained therein for each strategic objective and principal risk. The risk appetite is defined by the board for each objective, and there are indeed 3 risks described where we are outside of our designated risk appetite. Being people, where we score 16 against a risk appetite of 12, quality, we score 12 against a risk appetite of 8, and finance, where we score 16 again against a risk appetite of 12. There is also under C1 a new risk described in the part which is yet to be assessed, which comes again in the previous conversation around pharmacy ops monitoring and debt. So the board is asked, as I say, to note about, discuss the risk analysis, and open the floor for questions.
Questions.
And just to flag, the audit committee had a conversation about this, not the most recent meeting, but the one before. So it's scrutinised there as well. Which, just a small comment that if the cover paper in future can just draw out what has changed significantly. So I know this time the main change has been that new. I think this time around the pod one is new. That'd be really helpful to see, and just where any significant changes in ratings have occurred would be. Oh, that shouldn't, you've got the movement at the right hand side, haven't you? Forget that last bit. There.
Yeah, I think we've been working on this as a board, haven't we? And I recognise that it's iterative. I think for me, I just wonder if we're still not articulating the key actual risks rather than consequences of the risk. When I look through this, I'm not sure we're really identifying the as I say, the kind of key risks that need to be tackled. For example, areas like states, perhaps they people as strongly as they could. Some of the workforce challenges beyond our people in general. I think we probably articulate those key risks more specifically, as I feel we're probably in the space of the consequence of the risk at the moment.
I think particularly in relation to estate. Sorry, Richard.
No, I was just going to say, I think so. There is a risk framework which feeds into the board assurance framework, and within that risk framework, I think that goes to the integrated risk committee, as you're aware, which kind of informs, whose discussion informs the board assurance framework itself, and they will be considered there. I think the question for the board about the extent to which you wish to be cited from discussion down the integrated risk committee.
I think that's a very pertinent one, particularly in relation to infrastructure, physical infrastructure. So could we ask, please, that is something that is asked as a question, and we get that assurance back into the board.
we don't have. We say that particularly because our system has infrastructure issues that are not unique, but certainly very impactful for us on performance, on our finances, on our waiting lists, etc. So coming back round to our conversation about waiting well, that is really important for us. So thank you very much. Are there any other questions on risk or that? No, thank you very much. Let me run round and see if there are any other questions or any other business. Sarah, may I start with you? Great.
Just to advise colleagues that the areas and inspection report for Surrey Electric Course and Police the thing section are due to be published this Friday.
Thank you very much. Good. Well, thank you again. And we started today's meeting with Fiona setting the scene of just how pressurised it is. And I think we all know across the system, having parts of the system here around the table, all parts of the system here around the table, how much effort is being expended and how much we want to say collectively a thank you and the continuation as we now go into winter as well. So thank you to all of our partners and all of their teams. Thank you also to the team who have made this broadcast possible, and to all of those members of the audience who have joined us today. We're very pleased to see you. I'm now going to bring our meeting to a close. Thank you.